We have a lot of news to cover in today's video, including some trade rumors on some pretty important guys like Patrik Laine and Nolan Patrick. Tyson Barrie set to hit free agency this offseason, and we have several signings and a fine to discuss as well. We'll jump into the latest coming up next. So welcome back to another video here at Top Shelf Hockey. Now, as I mentioned, we have a variety of news to talk about here today. Of course, the last number of videos we've been focusing on the playoff previews and getting all those out. We're about halfway through with the playoff series being previewed and predictions being given. And we haven't touched on some news here for a while, so we've kind of built up a lot to talk about here. Now, first up, the Minnesota Wild forward Ryan Hartman has been fined maximum under the CBA of $5,000 for a dangerous trip against Sammy Blais of the St. Louis Blues. So we've seen a lot of these lately, really since that Tom Wilson incident where he was fined but not suspended. I just find player safety's been doing a lot of smaller items with finding and shorter term suspensions. It's kind of weird. I'm not sure if it's kind of connected or not. It just seems to me that we've seen more of these since that happened. Maybe I'm crazy, but I think they've been kind of focusing more on some of these other items to kind of get more of this stuff looked after. So Hartman pays the fine of $5,000, and that's the end of that story now. That's all in terms of suspensions or fines, but we have several signings to discuss, including some prospects here. But first up, the Ottawa Senators announced today they weren't wasting any time extending defenseman Artem, who they had signed on a one-year contract coming over from Russia. He worked out extremely well, even though he started the year being the extra defenseman and didn't play a lot. Once he got in there, he never really came out and really fit nicely and settled things down on the back end. A really nice right shot defenseman with a steadying defensive presence back there. They've got him on a 2-year extension and a $2.5 million AAV. Of course, it's backloaded, so the second year is much higher. I believe the second year pays him a $3.75 salary. So certainly something well-deserved on his part. I think it's a great cap hit for him. I personally was thinking they might try to sign him a little bit longer, but I think they might be wanting to make sure they don't box out some of their younger players here. As much as Zub really proved to be a steadying presence back there, he's already in his mid-20s, and they have lots of guys like Jake Sanderson, Tyler Clevin, Lassie Thompson, and others, and along with the younger players that are already there. They want to make sure they have their options open and don't get into another contract like they have with the Nikita Zaitsev deal that they obviously took off the Maple Leafs' hands in a trade a couple of years ago. But still, I think they're a little cautious here to extend him too long after one solid year, just in case things don't keep up. But overall, that's a great signing. There's also some rumors that they're really close to extending Victor Mete, who they picked up from Montreal on waivers. Mete's fit in very, very nicely, especially after the injury to Thomas Chabot, took on even more minutes, and really has been a great find for Ottawa. They needed another player to play that left side, and he was perfect for what they were looking for. So in the last couple of games of the year, he was playing well over 20 minutes a night and fitting in nicely. So an extension for him should be available in short order. They've also advised goalie Marcus Hogberg in their exit interviews that he's a pending RFA and he's not going to be qualified. They just have way too many goaltenders right now, and he's low man on the totem pole with performance. Of course, they got Murray under longer-term contract. They extended Anton Forsberg a year, and they have Joey Decord and Philip Gustafsson, who played extremely well here down the stretch. So, they just don't have a need for more goalies. They also have guys like Kevin Mandolese and Matt Sogard in the American Hockey League. So they, in the near future, could have an embarrassment of riches in that position. So, they don't really need yet another guy who struggled. So Hogberg's time in Ottawa will come to an end. Be interesting to see if another team picks him up here. Now, a few other prospects getting ELCs today as well, including the New York Islanders signing Reese Newkirk. He was a 2019 fifth-round pick from the WHL's Portland Winterhawks. He's a 20-year-old center iceman as well, so he gets his ELC. The San Jose Sharks have also signed a seventh-rounder from the 2020 NHL draft. That's Adam Raska from the Czech Republic, who can play center as well as wing. Not really sure what the plan is for Raska for next season, if he'll come to North America or if he will remain over in Europe for another season. But certainly, you don't see seventh-round picks getting signed that quickly after their draft year that often, so that's quite an accomplishment. He ended up going 201st overall just this past summer. And the Tampa Bay Lightning might have found themselves an undrafted free agent that could fit with them as well longer term. We'll see how things work out, but they've signed Swedish player Simon Ryfors, who's 23, soon to be 24 years old. He's been playing over in the SHL for the last while, had a real solid year this year, putting up 45 points in 51 games. So he will come to North America, I believe, and join the Lightning organization next year on his contract. And if they get him there and things work out, that could be another great find here. here. We know the Lightning avoided a lot of their cap crunch this past offseason. Obviously, they had guys like Kucherov and Stamkos and others spend an extreme amount of time on long-term injury reserve, and they found several loopholes, in my opinion, to work around it. I'm not sure they're going to be able to get away with that this year. And of course, they'll lose a player in the expansion draft too. So they're going to need some more guys on cheaper contracts. And if he works out, he could be one of them to kind of help them out and see if he can get an opportunity to play in a regular spot with the Lightning here next year. And before we jump into the trade rumors and free agent talk, I just want to take a moment here and acknowledge our channel sponsor. Top Shelf Hockey is proud to be sponsored by Manscape. Of course, with Manscape, we have a special offer here for all Top Shelf Hockey viewers where you can get 20% off and free shipping into all orders at manscaped.com. Now, of course, Manscaped just launched a brand new Lawnmower 4.0 trimmer, which is a fantastic product. They've taken the level up here even again with the skin-safe replaceable blades. It's waterproof, it's wireless charging, has a travel lock on it, as well as a nice light so you don't miss what you're doing. So certainly a terrific product. Now, many people associate Manscaped with their trimmers, which is certainly kind of their top product, but they do have a lot of other great options as well, including what they call the Weed Whacker, which is another trimmer for your ears and nose. And they have a variety of deodorants and sprays as well, which also keep you fresh and are terrific as well. So certainly Manscaped has a lot to offer, and we certainly highly recommend all of their products. So check out manscaped.com and use promo code TSH for 20% off and free shipping. So obviously, thank you for checking out our promotional video through Manscaped. Obviously, Manscaped's been a big help and sponsor to the channel the last number of weeks, and we certainly appreciate what they've done, and certainly appreciate you guys considering checking them out as well. All support is a good help here to the channel. Now, I want to start with the Edmonton Oilers. The Oilers are going to be an interesting team in free agency. We'll see what they can do in the playoffs. Obviously, be interesting if they can come out of the North or how things will play out there, but they're going to have some pretty significant contract decisions to make, and it could very well alter how this team looks next year. Of course, the main player we're going to talk about today is Tyson Barrie. Tyson Barrie's having a breakthrough season, or a comeback season, I guess you could say, after a failed experiment last year in Toronto where his numbers really dipped down after several strong years with the Colorado Avalanche. He ended up taking a 1-year, $3.75 million contract, bet on himself to bounce back, and of course, playing with McDavid and Draisaitl, getting power play time. That's sure going to help on your statistics. That's a given here, as long as you can be a decent player, and he's been that. He's done very well in the power play, and he very well could have played well enough to price himself out of Edmonton. It is believed that he likely won't be signed before free agency kicks in, and he is going to be testing the market and see what else is out there. I mean, this is Barrie's opportunity to really kind of hit a home run here, and probably one of his final longer-term contracts of his career. Given where he's in his later 20s now, it's likely that this could be the bulk of the money that he makes for the remainder of the way. At least it's quite possible. So last year, when things didn't work out in Toronto, that's kind of what he was hoping for to get done, is get one more contract, on a long-term deal, 5, 6, 7 years, and that would kind of take him to near the end of his career at least. And he didn't get that because, well, for one, things failed miserably in Toronto, and then secondly, with COVID and the lost revenues, everybody was taking pay cuts, so that didn't help either. So teams likely are going to be willing to pay up for this guy after what he's accomplished in Edmonton, but I would certainly caution them not to throw too much money at him, because if you don't have McDavid and Draisaitl in your lineup, he's not going to have quite the offensive players to be feeding on the power play, and it could impact what he could provide. But he's certainly a great offensive defenseman, there's no doubt about it. But given the fact that they've also got some big contracts like Ryan Nugent-Hopkins to deal with, and others, I mean, there's a guy like Nurse and Larson, so there's a lot on Ken Holland's plate, and I just wonder that a guy like Barrie might not be as high on the pecking order like a Ryan Nugent-Hopkins, for example, and he's not going to want to wait around and see how things go. I mean, I know negotiations with RNH, from what we've heard, haven't been the greatest, and there's a possibility he could hit market too, but I think he wants to be an Oiler, and we'll see if they can get that figured out. But with everything they have going on, I think Oilers are probably going to be taking their time to get some things done, and Barrie will see if there's maybe something better out there for him on a long-term basis that he can cash in, and I'm sure there'll be plenty of interest once we get there. Now, another player to keep your eye on for a potential fresh start scenario is former number 2 overall pick, Nolan Patrick of the Philadelphia Flyers. There's reports from Dreger on TSN Insider Trading here as well that there's a pretty good chance we'll see that happen. Obviously, Patrick was able to come back and play a lot this year, which is a great thing. He played majority of the games for Philly, but he only put up 9 points. So I guess if you want to try to take some positives out of this, the fact that he was able to play majority of the season and not have injuries and not have the concussion symptoms or the headache issues or whatever he was dealing with last year or seem to have subsided. So that's obviously a positive. It's good news, but he's still not anywhere near the player that they were expecting when he was drafted. So will a change of scenery be able to bring that out in him? It's a real possibility, but there's certainly no given. But to see him maybe swap for a potential other younger player who's also maybe looking for a fresh start could very well be something that we see. It's hard to say what kind of package deal they could be in, because the Flyers are a team I would suspect are probably considering some more significant changes. We did get confirmation that head coach Alain Vigneault will be coming back. So based on the coach not changing, I would think we're going to see some player personnel changes, and I think Patrick could likely be a part of that. I'm not sure how significant they'll go or what other guys could likely be available on that list to try and make something happen for change, but Patrick could certainly benefit from that. I would imagine there will be interest, but hard to say exactly where he ends up, but I'd expect him to be wearing a different uniform come next season. And lastly, I want to talk about Patrik Laine. Now, Laine is a player that, personally, I won't be shocked if he stays and resigns in Columbus. But after a recent article a few days ago from a beat writer, Aaron Portzline of The Athletic, it kind of makes me wonder if maybe they would trade him. Now, this article seems to suggest, which is a little bit different than what we heard from comments, that the Jackets are very open to trading Laine, that there are some people in the organization that really feel strongly about that he shouldn't really be part of the future, and that investing too much money in a long-term deal for him would be a big mistake. So clearly there's a bit of a divide, at least it seems like, because listen to Jarmo Kekalainen talk, it seems like they want to bring him back for sure. Laine said lots of good things about the organization, even about Tortorella for that matter. He wants to stay. All the right things were said publicly to make us think that Laine is likely going to sign a decent term contract and remain in Columbus. But this article, which is, obviously has inside sources and information, kind of suggests there's a different approach here. So, it's hard to say how things go with the Jackets. I mean, the other big factor here, though, in my opinion, and I think that they'll want to try to have these conversations first, is do they sign a long-term extension with Seth Jones? I think Seth Jones is the big X factor for Columbus personally, that if he is extended and they can work out a deal to keep him around for another 5, 6, 7 years, that's obviously going to have a big impact on where the direction of this team goes. But if Seth Jones doesn't want to do a contract extension, if he's interested in hitting UFA status next year, which he's going into the final year of his deal, and they have concerns over his desire to remain there, then I think they could possibly decide to maybe tear this down a little further and go through more of a rebuild, more so than a reset. In my opinion, there's several missing pieces there in Columbus, but they do have a few good building blocks, and obviously the strength of the blue line has been something that they've been able to build off of here between Jones and Werenski especially, and you take Jones out of the picture, that creates a big hole. They traded Dubois for Laine, so they have a high-scoring winger who should be able to hopefully be a high-scoring winger again, but now they have a big hole at center. So, what do they do here? Now, the article does go on to suggest possibly the Jackets getting into the Jack Eichel sweepstakes. Now, I don't know how likely this would be, but it just makes you wonder. Right now, Eichel is the hot topic, and obviously many teams around the league are going to be at least interested in having conversations about what would it take. Most of them won't get too serious, mind you, but he suggested in this article, could Jonas Korpisalo, Patrik Laine, and a couple of first-round picks get a deal done? And I'd have to think that it's something that at the very least that the Sabres would seriously consider. I can't say for sure they would do that deal because it really boils down to what the other offers are. In recent days, we've talked about the Rangers, the Kings, and the Wild, on the Ducks even, also being pretty, front-running contenders to possibly land his services if an Eichel trade takes place. Will an Eichel trade take place before we know that he's 100% healthy? Because we know there's a bit of a standoff between what the proper way to fix his neck issue is. I mean, Eichel wants to have a surgery. The Sabres don't want him to. Until all that gets resolved and he actually has a procedure or not or whatever, until he's deemed healthy, will he even be traded? Will teams want to take that risk on? It's difficult to say. But for the Jackets, I mean, clearly the Sabres need a goalie. So a guy like Korpisalo, or even if they went Elvis, either way, one of those two guys could be the goalie for the Sabres that they need. So that's a good piece. And obviously, Laine is a former 40-goal scoring winger with a high potential. So if you can't get a center, I bet you can get a guy. The next best thing is a really high-scoring winger, and he has that potential. So you throw in some first-round picks. Columbus might be a team that obviously might not have a real high finish in the standings next couple of years, so you might get some decent selections out of that. Yeah, I think they would have to seriously consider it. Now, they may want something a little differently. Maybe instead of 2 first-rounders, maybe they want 1 first-rounder and a decent young player. Maybe they throw in a guy like Texier or Bemstrom or, Gavrikov, or I'm not sure exactly what that would be, but, something to that effect. But I do, after thinking about things, after reading this article, I do have to think that, maybe they actually would stand a chance. Now, of course, keep in mind here that the Jackets would have to seriously want to do this deal and trade Laine. You take Laine out of the picture, and I really don't think they have any kind of a chance. I think he would have to be a piece included here, or it's not going to happen. I think he would be the main piece that the Sabres would be interested in if they were going to do a deal with the Jackets. But, at the end of the day here, there's a difference of opinion between what we're hearing from the player and the team versus this, writer and their sources. And, Portzline, for the most part, does seem to be pretty accurate and know his stuff. So I have to say that he likely does have some accurate info there. But at the end of the day, if there's a divide within the organization on the thoughts on Laine, it really boils down to Kekalainen. He's the ultimate decision maker. So we will see. But if Laine is moved, it'd be very interesting to see if they get into the Eichel sweepstakes. Do you think that makes sense? Is it something they should do? Let me know your thoughts down in the comments. We'll discuss further. If you're new to the channel, consider subscribing and sticking around. We'll keep you up to date with all the latest news from all 32 NHL teams. Thank you for watching, and I'll catch you next time.